지금 가자.
와 시원해. 너무 시원해. 저 폭포 봐. 멋있다. 멋있고 시원하고. 그래서 안 좋아서.
क्या बेटा What happened Maza?你不用走太远，啊，等他走远一点。
过来咯
已。经快到了。对啊，因为他们真的是老公那种。
先不管了，
好。
反正洞小小的。
No. Можно, да? Будем фоткаться?
Okay. Would you like to start with something to drink, or you want to have a look at the menu first? Water. You can make beer as well. Would you like to have a big souvenir bit?
Chloe.
Very bubbly. baby के लिए देखा वाह भाई so why you back to like it's the fun hero boy see oh wait you're right oh stupid
Okay, you want me to give me a sweater?
It's okay. Yung mga sinasabi mo, dalawa.
but there's a lot of plants so I forgot to माना कि मैं अकेली आई हूँ मेरी फोटो की कोई बात
Twee staartjes. Twee staartjes mee.
चलो चले ये तेरी पीछे से नहीं लगते भैया तू वरना तो बाल
I don't want you to fall over. Bring me back, please.
How would you take the hat off? I think it's adding a lot of shade on your face.
No, it's too funny. Why, Mom?
I got it, but
Look at your face. That's like it was if you thought we could.
이쪽 봐봐. Maga adesso sta facendo. Maga 오늘 해줄 거만.
今天天气相当的好，我找人帮我拍到了这山里。
你好，哦那边那边。
Yes or no? People need to make decisions. Okay, then down. Go take a picture of Kate.
где фото?
Здесь сделаем.
Что?
Можно
пойти
А здесь не будем?
попробуй.